chosen one, hear this now. Stop what you are doing, because in the next 4 minutes I am going to tell you something about your job that you have already felt and have not been able to say out loud. That tightness just under your collarbone on Sunday evenings. That exhaustion that arrives before the day has even started. The kind sleep does not touch. That flat, quiet dread when a friend asks how work is going and you hear yourself say, "Fine," in a voice that is not yours. Do not let anyone talk you out of what your body is reporting. That is not weakness. That is a reading. Maybe the last 72 hours have felt unusually loaded. Perhaps a meeting was moved without a clear reason. Maybe a name you had not thought about in years surfaced on your phone. Maybe someone who has never once asked your opinion suddenly asked it, and the room went slightly quiet while you answered. Or maybe you have been lying awake at 3 in the morning doing math you already know the answer to, wondering how much longer you can keep doing something that pays you well and costs you more than it pays. Here is what nobody has told you. Your job is about to change suddenly, and it is not changing because you failed at it. It is changing because you outgrew the container 18 months ago, and everything you have been calling burnout is the pressure of something too large sitting in a space too small. Something is working overtime this week to make you quit in the wrong way, at the wrong hour, on the wrong terms. Not because you are weak, because a person who leaves in exhaustion leaves without the thing they came to collect. And something out there knows exactly what you have accumulated in these years of being underestimated. You are not becoming valuable because someone finally noticed. You have been valuable through every year nobody did. Within the next 24 hours, the fog around this decision can begin to lift, and the confusion you have been carrying about whether to stay or go can begin to lose its grip. You chose to keep your standard when cutting corners was rewarded. You chose to stay steady when the room got political. You chose to keep doing excellent work for people who had already decided not to see it. Think back to that moment this week when you wanted to defend yourself, correct the record, or send the message that would have made you feel better for 11 minutes. And you stopped. You closed the laptop instead. You thought that silence made you look replaceable. That silence was the interview. That was the moment the file on you was updated, and it was not updated by anyone in your building. You did not find this message by accident. The algorithm may have placed it in front of you, but your awareness chose to stay, and awareness is the one thing no system can manufacture for you. So, stay with me to the very last second, because in the time we have together, I am going to hand you 3 things. I am going to give you the reason your work has felt unbearable in exactly this season, and it is not the reason you have been telling yourself. I am going to walk you through the signal board, the small set of events that always appear in the 72 hours before a sudden change, so that you stop being surprised by your own life. And I am going to give you the 4 questions that separate the safe door from the correct door, because both of them are going to open, and they are going to open close enough together to feel like one decision. Do not leave this message early. Your future self needs what is in the middle of it, not the beginning. If you walk away now, you go back to the same chair tomorrow with the same fog, and when the phone call comes, and it is coming, you answer it as the version of you who is still guessing. Picture that clearly. Picture the call arriving on a Tuesday afternoon while you are tired and unprepared. Picture yourself saying, "Let me think about it." And picture the room on the other end going quiet in a way you will replay for years. I have watched this exact thing happen more times than I can count. Years ago, I sat with a woman who had been at the same company for 19 years. She told me she felt guilty for being unhappy because so many people would want her position. 3 weeks later, her department was restructured and she was moved into a role she had never applied for, a role that used the part of her nobody had touched in a decade. She called me and said the strangest sentence. She said, "I think I was being kept, not stuck. Something has been whispering a very specific lie into your season. The lie has 4 parts. It says you waited too long. It says the market has changed, and you did not change with it. It says the people who moved ahead of you were simply better. And it says the door you actually want closed quietly years ago, and nobody had the decency to tell you. Every part of that is a lie, and here is the verdict that overrides it. Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 3. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, and at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. Notice what that verse does not say. It does not say the vision failed. It does not say you missed the window. It says there is an appointed time, and appointed means scheduled by somebody other than you. The delay you have been grieving is not evidence of absence. It is evidence of a calendar you were not shown. I want you to feel the weight of that before we go further, because everything else in this message rests on it. The appointed time is not tomorrow in the vague sense that people use to comfort each other. It is a date. It exists. And your only real job between now and then is to arrive at it intact and awake. There was a second moment this week, smaller than the first. You noticed something you would normally miss. A tone in someone's voice, a pause before an answer, a door that is usually open which was closed. You told yourself you were reading into things. You were not reading into things. Your perception has been sharpening for months, and sharpening is uncomfortable because a sharper instrument feels everything the dull one used to slide past. Chosen one, that discomfort is not damage. That discomfort is calibration. Now let me tell you what the word suddenly actually means, because the entire rest of this message depends on you understanding it correctly, and almost nobody does. In Hebrew, there is a word, pithom. It is the word used when something arrives without warning, when the shape of a life changes between 1 hour and the next. But the word does not describe the process. It describes the moment of contact. It describes the instant the invisible thing finally touches the ground where people can see it. Pithom is not a description of how long something took to build. It is a description of how quickly it became visible. That distinction is going to save you a great deal of unnecessary grief. So let me make it concrete. There is a bamboo that grows across parts of Asia. You plant the seed, you water it. The first year, nothing appears above the soil. The second year, nothing. The third year, nothing. The fourth year, still nothing. And by then, most people have quietly stopped watering because 4 years of watering bare dirt does something to a person. Then in the fifth year, the shoot breaks the surface, and in roughly 6 weeks, it grows taller than the house beside it. Now ask the honest question. Did that bamboo grow in 6 weeks, or did it grow in 5 years? Everyone who watched only the 6th week calls it sudden. Everyone who watched the 5 years calls it inevitable. The bamboo did not spend those years doing nothing. It spent those years building a root structure wide enough and deep enough to hold the height that was coming. If the shoot had come up in year 2, the first strong wind would have taken it down, and the seed would have died as a story about promise that could not hold weight. I want to give this its proper name, because named things stop haunting you. What you have been living in is the incubation floor. It is the phase where all the growth is structural, none of it is visible, and every honest measurement you take says nothing is happening. The incubation floor is the most spiritually dangerous stretch of any life, not because it lacks power, but because it produces no evidence. And human beings will abandon almost anything that produces no evidence, no matter how much they believe in it. Here is how you know you are on the incubation floor, rather than in genuine stagnation. And I want you to actually test yourself against this, rather than just listening to it. On the incubation floor, your capacity keeps expanding while your circumstances stay identical. You handle things this year that would have wrecked you 3 years ago, and nobody has adjusted your title or your pay to match. In genuine stagnation, capacity and circumstances are both flat. Nothing about you is harder to break than it was before. On the incubation floor, your tolerance for things you used to accept keeps dropping. Meetings that used to be merely tedious now feel physically expensive. Conversations that used to be survivable now feel like theft. That is not you becoming difficult. That is a system correctly signaling that the fit has failed. On the incubation floor, you keep receiving small, strange confirmations that arrive at the exact moment you decide to give up. A message from someone unrelated, a line in a book you opened at random, a number you keep seeing. Stagnation does not produce confirmations. Stagnation is silent all the way through. And on the incubation floor, the thing you would do, if money were not a factor, keeps getting clearer, not blurrier. That clarity is not a fantasy. It is a specification being written. Chosen one, if 3 of those 4 describe your last year, you are not stuck, you are underground. And underground is not a punishment. Underground is where root systems are made, and root systems are the only reason height is survivable. Which brings me to the sentence I want lodged in you for the rest of this message, because we are going to return to it many times before we finish. The sudden is not a punishment, the sudden is a summons. Chosen one, as we move deeper into this, I need you to let something settle that most people spend an entire career refusing to look at directly. Let me describe your last 18 months back to you, and I want you to notice how specific I am willing to be, because vague comfort is worth nothing to a person in your position. You have been more tired than the work justifies, not the tired that a weekend fixes, the kind that sits behind your eyes on a Wednesday morning and makes the drive feel longer than the distance. You have found yourself sitting in the parking lot after arriving, engine off, for 2 or 3 minutes longer than necessary, doing nothing in particular. You have opened a document you know how to write and stared at it while your mind went somewhere else entirely. And at some point in the last few months, you caught yourself calculating how many years are left before you can stop. You have also become strangely forgetful in small ways that embarrass you. A word disappears mid-sentence. A name you have known for a decade will not come when you reach for it. You walk into a room and the reason evaporates. And because you are the kind of person who takes responsibility for things, you have quietly filed all of this under a single explanation. You decided you are getting older, or you decided you have lost your discipline, or you decided that somewhere along the way, you simply stopped being as sharp as you used to be, and that this is what happens, and everyone goes through it, and you should be grateful and stop complaining. I want to remove that explanation from the table, and I want to do it carefully, because it has been sitting there so long it feels like furniture. Fatigue that comes from doing too much has a very particular shape. It responds to rest. You take 4 days off, you feel restored, you return with something in the tank. That is the fatigue of overuse, and it is honest fatigue, and it heals the way a muscle heals. What you have been carrying does not respond to rest. You have taken the days off. You have come back on Monday, and by 10 in the morning, the weight was already back in the same position, in the same spot behind your eyes, as if it had been waiting in your chair. That is not the fatigue of overuse. That is the fatigue of misfit. And misfit fatigue does not heal with rest, because rest is not the missing ingredient. Here is the mechanism nobody explains, and once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it in your own life or in the lives of everyone around you. Every role you occupy has a ceiling built into it. Not a ceiling of pay, a ceiling of demand. There is a maximum amount of judgment, creativity, discernment, and decision-making that the position is designed to require from whoever holds it. When you first arrive, your capacity is below that ceiling, and the gap between you and the ceiling is what you experience as challenge. Challenge is energizing. That is the season people describe as loving their work. Then you grow. You solve the same class of problem enough times that solving it stops requiring you. You develop instincts. You start seeing 3 moves ahead in a game the role only ever asked you to see 1 move ahead in. And at some point, without any announcement and without any warning, your capacity crosses the ceiling of the role. And here is the part that ruins people. Nothing changes on the outside on the day that happens. The desk is the same, the salary is the same, the calendar is the same. The only thing that changes is that from that day forward, every hour you spend there requires you to run a large engine at low output, and a large engine at low output does not idle peacefully. It vibrates, it heats, it burns fuel, producing nothing. I want to name this precisely because you have been living inside it without a word for it, and a thing without a word cannot be addressed. What has been draining you is the competence cage. The competence cage is the trap that only catches capable people. It has 3 bars, and I want to walk you through all 3 because you are standing between them right now. The first bar is that competence is rewarded with more of the same. When you prove you can handle something, the system does not promote you out of it. The system gives you more of it because you are the safest place to put it. Your reward for excellence is a heavier version of the thing you have already outgrown, and it looks like recognition, which is why it is so hard to resist. The second bar is that competence makes you expensive to release. The better you are at holding things together, the more expensive your absence becomes to the people above you. So the very quality that should be moving you upward becomes the reason you are held in place. Nobody says this out loud. Nobody has to. It expresses itself as a series of very reasonable delays. And the third bar, the one that actually holds the door shut, is that competence produces a feeling that is easily mistaken for purpose. You are good at this. People rely on you. Being relied upon feels like meaning. And you can spend a decade inside a cage whose bars are made of being needed, telling yourself that a place where you are needed must be the place where you belong. Chosen one, being needed and being called are not the same thing, and confusing them has cost more good people, more good years than almost any other era I know of. Now let me do the thing that I believe is the real reason you are still listening. I want to go back through your last several years with this mechanism in hand and rewrite what they meant, because you have been carrying a verdict on yourself that the evidence does not support. You thought you were losing your edge. You were pressing a sharpened edge against a surface too soft to register it. You thought you had become lazy. You had become efficient at something that no longer required your full presence, and your full presence had nowhere to go. You thought your mind was slipping. Your mind was running a background process that never resolved, which is the most expensive kind of cognitive load there is. And it was running that process every single day inside a room that never gave it an answer. You thought the restlessness meant you were ungrateful. The restlessness was accurate. You thought the years were wasted. The years built exactly the root system we talked about, and the reason you cannot see the value of what you built is that you built it underground, where nobody photographs anything. Think of Joseph in the house of Potiphar, and then in the prison. He was not idle in either place. He ran the house. He ran the prison. He became the most competent person in every room he was thrown into, and his competence did not release him. His competence made him indispensable to the exact places he was trying to leave. For years, his excellence was the reason he stayed. And then, in a single afternoon, a man remembered a dream, and Joseph went from a cell to the second highest office in the nation before the sun went down. Nothing in Joseph changed that morning. The room changed. The demand finally rose to meet a capacity that had already been finished for years. That is what is about to happen suddenly with your work. Your job is about to change suddenly, and the change will not be a reward for something you do next week. It will be a room finally opening that is large enough to require the version of you that has already been built. So let me give you something to do with all of this tonight, because insight that stays as insight is a very expensive kind of entertainment. I want you to make one honest measurement this week. Take the last 90 days and identify the 3 hardest things that happened at your work. Not the most annoying, the hardest. Now ask a single question about each one. Did solving it require the best of what you have, or did it require the practiced part of what you have? If all 3 required only the practiced part, you have your answer, and you have had it for a long time. You are not tired because the work is too much. You are tired because the work is too small, and something very large in you has been holding still to fit in the frame. Do not act on that yet. Do not write the resignation letter tonight. There is a right way for this door to open and a wrong way to force it, and forcing it is exactly what the pressure of this season is designed to make you do. We are going to get to the difference, and it matters more than almost anything else I will tell you. For now, hold this. The exhaustion is not the verdict on you. The exhaustion is the receipt for growth that has not yet been given a place to spend itself. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment. The sudden is a summons. chosen one. As we enter this next layer of the message, allow what comes now to settle deeper than the last part, because we are moving from diagnosis into something you can actually use before this week is over. If the first thing I gave you was a mirror, this next thing is a set of instruments. And I am going to be very concrete, because vague spirituality has never once helped a person read the actual moment they are standing in. A sudden change always announces itself, and it announces itself the same way every time. It always announces itself. The announcement is simply written in a language most people were never taught to read, and because they cannot read it, they experience the arrival as a shock, and then spend years telling the story as though it came out of nowhere. I have sat with enough people on the other side of a sudden change to notice something that has never once failed. When you walk them backward through the 72 hours before the change landed, 3 specific kinds of events are always sitting there, every time. And in every case, the person says the same sentence. They say, "I noticed that. I just did not think it meant anything. I want to give you the board so that you stop dismissing your own instruments." I call it the signal board, and it has 3 lights. The first light is displacement. Something in your normal pattern moves without a good reason. A recurring meeting is cancelled or shifted. A person who is always in the office is unexpectedly out. A project you were told was urgent goes quiet. A schedule that has been fixed for a year is suddenly fluid. Most people read displacement as disorganization. Displacement is not disorganization. Displacement is what happens when a decision is being made above your line of sight, and decisions in progress always disturb the schedules of the people who are making them. The disturbance reaches you before the decision does. You are feeling the wake of a ship you have not yet seen. The second light is retrieval. Something from your past reappears without you reaching for it. An old colleague messages you out of nowhere. A company you interviewed with 4 years ago shows up in your feed. Someone mentions a skill of yours that you have not used since a previous job. A memory of a specific season keeps returning while you are driving. Most people read retrieval as coincidence or nostalgia. Retrieval is neither. Retrieval is what it looks like when the material for your next chapter is being pulled from storage. Nothing in your history is discarded. It is warehoused. And when a new assignment is being assembled, the pieces you thought were obsolete are the first things brought back to the surface, because the new thing is going to require the whole of you, not just the part you have been using recently. The third light is examination. Someone begins asking you questions that are slightly larger than your role. What would you do if this were yours? How would you handle it if there were no budget limit? Why do you think that keeps failing? Sometimes the question comes from a superior. Sometimes it comes from a stranger. Sometimes it arrives disguised as small talk at a place that has nothing to do with your work. Most people read examination as flattery, or as a trap, or as nothing at all. Examination is a test being administered by someone who has already begun to imagine you somewhere else. Nobody asks a person to think above their position unless they are quietly measuring whether the person can. Displacement, retrieval, examination. 3 lights, and every sudden change in a working life turns at least one of them on first. 1 light is noise. Life produces one of those every month without meaning anything at all. 2 lights inside a single week is worth writing down. 3 lights inside 72 hours has never once, in everything I have observed, been nothing. Now I want to pause here, because there is something else I need to place in front of you before we go any further, and this is the right moment for it. Over the last several years, something was worked out in research laboratories that almost nobody in rooms like this one has been told about, not because it contradicts anything sacred, because it came from a direction most of us are not watching, and the people who care most about the things we are discussing tonight are rarely reading what comes out of a neurology department in New York. It concerns the reason a capable, sincere, prepared person can stand directly in front of the moment they have been waiting years for and fail to recognize it while it is happening. It traces back to work that won a Nobel Prize, and yet the application of it is so simple that it sounds almost suspicious the first time you hear it described. I am going to tell you exactly what they found later in this message, and I am going to tell you why it matters more for your specific situation than anything else I could hand you. But not yet. For now, I want you to sit with one question and let it stay open. What if the fog you have been apologizing for is not age, and not a lack of discipline, and not a character flaw at all? What if something was taken from you? Hold that, we will come back to it. Now let me return to the signal board, because there is a second use of it that is more important than the first. The signal board does not only tell you that something is moving, it tells you what kind of movement it is. And knowing the kind matters enormously, because there are two entirely different events that both look like a sudden job change from the outside. The first kind is subtraction. Something ends, a role dissolves, a company restructures, a relationship at work becomes untenable, a door closes with a sound. Subtraction is loud. It usually arrives on someone else's timetable, and it always feels like something is being done to you. The second kind is extraction. You are pulled out. A call comes. A position is created. Someone with authority reaches into where you are and lifts you into a room you did not apply for. Extraction is quiet. It usually arrives through a person rather than a process, and it feels like being chosen even before anyone uses that word. Here is what almost nobody knows. In most lives, subtraction and extraction happen within weeks of each other, and the order they arrive in decides whether the person tells this story as a tragedy or as a testimony. I want to be very careful here, because I am not going to promise you a timeline, and I am not going to tell you that nothing painful is on your calendar. I do not know your calendar. What I can tell you is what I have watched repeatedly in the lives of people who were in exactly the season you are describing. When extraction comes first, the person leaves standing up. They walk out of the old room towards something, and the closing of the old door is barely a footnote in the story they tell afterward. When subtraction comes first, the person leaves sitting down. The old thing ends before the new thing appears, and there is a gap, and that gap is where almost all the damage in a life like yours actually happens. Not from the loss, from what a capable person does to their own self-image during the weeks in the gap. And here is the thing I most want you to hear. The length of that gap is not fixed. The gap exists because of a delay between the door opening and you recognizing that it opened. Some of that delay is circumstance, and none of us control it. But a large portion of that delay, larger than anyone wants to admit, is recognition speed. It is the amount of time between an opportunity presenting itself and a person perceiving it clearly enough to move on it while it is still open. Chosen one, that is the variable, not the door, not the timing, the speed at which you recognize what is in front of you on a day you did not get to schedule. We are going to come back to that, and when we do, I am going to show you why it is the single most controllable thing in your entire situation, and why it is also the thing almost nobody works on. For now, watch the board. Displacement, retrieval, examination. Write down what you see this week with the date beside it. Do not interpret, just record. You will understand later why the record matters more than the interpretation. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment. The sudden is a summons. Chosen one, as we continue into this next unfolding, let the weight of what comes now sit somewhere deeper than your thoughts, because this part is about a wound most capable people carry and almost never name. I want to talk about the gap, not the gap between jobs, the gap inside a person during the weeks when the old thing has ended and the new thing has not yet arrived. I have watched people survive extraordinary losses, and I have watched people be quietly ruined by 6 weeks of unstructured time, and the difference has almost nothing to do with money. It has to do with what a high-functioning person does to themselves when there is no longer a place to put their competence. Here is what happens in the gap. On day 3, you feel relief. On day 9, you feel restless. By the end of the second week, the restlessness has turned into a specific and cruel voice, and that voice does not attack you where you are weak. It attacks you where you are strong. It says, "Look how quickly they replaced you." It says, "All that loyalty, and it took them 11 days." It says, Maybe you were never as necessary as you believed. And a person who spent years being the reliable one, the one who held it together, the one they all called, is uniquely defenseless against that particular accusation because their entire sense of self was built on being needed, and the evidence of being needed has just been removed. Chosen one, I want to hand you the truth about that, and I want you to hold on to it before you ever need it. The speed at which a place absorbs your absence is not a measurement of your value. It is a measurement of how well you built the thing while you were there. The better you did it, the smoother it runs without you. You are not being told you were unnecessary. You are being shown the quality of what you left behind. Now let me tell you about a man I sat with a few years ago, because the shape of what happened to him is going to matter later in this message. He had been an operations manager for 11 years at a company where he had built almost every process they used. He was let go in a restructuring on a Thursday morning with a severance package and a handshake. He told me the worst part was not the loss of income. The worst part was that for the first 3 weeks, he could not make decisions. He said, "I have made 1,000 decisions a week for a decade, and now I cannot decide what to do at 11 in the morning. That is not weakness. That is what happens when the structure that was organizing a person's mind is removed, and the mind has to build its own scaffolding for the first time in years. It is temporary, but while it lasts, it is disorienting in a way that people who have not been through it consistently underestimate." Now here is what he told me 8 months later, and this is why I am telling you this at all. He said, 3 good things came to me during those weeks, and I could only see one of them at the time. Read that again in your own mind. 3 good things came, and he could only see one. That is the gap, and that is the real danger of it. It is not that opportunity stops arriving. It is that the internal instrument you use to detect opportunity is running at reduced sensitivity at precisely the moment the arrivals begin. This is the point where I need to give this its name, because we are going to build on it for the rest of our time together. The distance between an opportunity being present and a person perceiving it clearly is what I want you to start calling the receiver gap. Everything you have ever prayed for has to arrive through a receiver. That is not a metaphor I am inventing for effect. The signal can be perfect, the timing can be exact, the door can be genuinely open, and the moment can still be lost entirely on the receiving end. And what makes the receiver gap so cruel is that from the inside it does not feel like a gap at all. It feels like nothing happened. I want to be exact about what I mean by the receiver, because I am not talking about faith, and I am not talking about worthiness. You have plenty of both. I am talking about the practical instrument through which a person perceives, evaluates, and responds to what is in front of them in real time. Attention, pattern recognition, the ability to hold 2 things at once and see the relationship between them. The speed at which a possibility becomes a decision. That instrument is not fixed. It varies. It varies dramatically with your state, and the version of you that walks into an unexpected conversation on a Tuesday afternoon is not always the same version that would have walked in on a different Tuesday. And this is the part that should make you sit up straight. The moments that change a life do not schedule themselves around your good days. Think about Ruth for a moment. In the field, gleaning behind the harvesters, there is a detail in that account that people skip past. It says she happened to come to the portion of the field belonging to Boaz. The text is almost casual about it, but everything downstream of that day, the redemption, the marriage, the lineage, the whole line that leads to David, hangs on her being in a particular field on a particular morning and being present enough to answer well when the owner of the field spoke to her. She did not know that morning was the hinge. Nobody knows. That is the entire nature of hinges. You are always awake or not awake on the day it matters, and you do not get told in advance which day that is. If this is landing, type already below. Now let me take this back into your specific situation, because I do not want to leave you with an interesting idea and no floor to stand on. You are approaching a sudden change, and suddenly is the only word that matters in that sentence. We have established what suddenly actually means. We have established the mechanism that has been draining you. We have established the 3 lights on the signal board. And now we have established that the deciding variable is not the door, but your condition on the day the door appears. So the honest question becomes very simple and very uncomfortable. What condition is your receiver in right now? I want you to answer that with evidence, not with hope. Here are 4 measurements, and you already know all 4 answers. You have simply never been asked to say them plainly. When was the last time an idea arrived fully formed? The kind where you did not construct it, it simply appeared complete. If your honest answer is measured in years rather than weeks, write that down. How long does it take you now to move from noticing a problem to seeing a path through it, compared to how long it took when you were 30? Not how well you solve it, how fast the shape of the solution appears. When you read something substantial, how much of it is still with you the next morning? Not the topic, the actual content, the sentences, the argument. And when someone says something in a conversation that matters, how often do you find the right response 2 hours later while you are driving, instead of in the room? Chosen one, if those 4 answers made you flinch, I need you to hear the next sentence very clearly, because everything else I say tonight depends on it landing correctly. That is not a character flaw. That is not laziness. That is not age doing something inevitable to you. And it is absolutely not evidence that you are less than the person you used to be. It is a measurable condition with a specific cause, and it has been happening to you gradually for so long that you adjusted to it the way a person adjusts to a room that gets darker by 1 degree per week. Nobody notices the darkening. Everyone notices when the light comes back on. We are going to return to what causes it. I told you earlier there was something worked out in a laboratory that speaks directly to this, and I meant it, and we will get there. But before we do, there is something else you need to understand about how the sudden change actually selects the people it selects. Because it is not random, and it is not seniority, and it is certainly not who asked loudest. Something has been watching, and what it has been watching is not your resume. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment, the sudden is a summons. Chosen one, as we move into this next flow of revelation, let your spirit recognize what is being described, because I am about to tell you what has actually been happening in the rooms you were not invited to. There is a phrase people use when a sudden change lands on someone else. They say, "I do not know how they got that," as if positions were distributed by lottery, or by charm, or by who happened to be standing closest to the person making the decision. I want to show you what actually happens, because once you see it, you will understand why the last 2 years have been so strange, and why the specific things that hurt most were the things that mattered most. Every sudden elevation I have ever traced backward began the same way. Somebody watched somebody handle something badly done to them, not handle a project, not handle a client, handle an injustice. Let me be very specific, because generalities will not help you here. The moments that get logged are these. How you spoke about the person who took credit for your work on the day it happened, to the one colleague who asked. Whether you slowed down after being passed over, or kept your standard at the same level for a job that had just told you it did not value the standard. What you did with information that could have damaged someone who had damaged you. Whether the quality of your work on the small invisible task was the same as on the visible one. Those are the moments, not the presentations, not the numbers, those. And here is why. Anyone can be measured for competence. Competence is cheap to verify and easy to teach. What cannot be verified in an interview, and what every serious person is actually trying to find out before they hand somebody real authority, is a single question. What does this person do when they have been wronged and there is no audience? Because authority multiplies whatever a person already is. Give a bitter person authority, and you get a department that runs on fear. Give a self-justifying person authority, and you get a culture where nobody admits mistakes. Give a person authority who has proven that they hold their standard, even when the standard is not being rewarded, and you get something rare enough that people build entire organizations around trying to find it. I want to name what you have been living through, because you have been in the middle of it and had no idea. You have been inside the quiet audition. The quiet audition has 4 properties, and every one of them is designed to make it invisible while it is happening. The first property is that you are never told it has started. There is no notification. There is no feedback. In an ordinary evaluation, you are given criteria and a date. In the quiet audition, you are given a situation and silence, and the silence is not an oversight. The silence is the instrument. A person who knows they are being watched performs. A person who believes nobody is watching reveals. The second property is that the material of the audition is always adversity, never opportunity. You do not get evaluated on how you handle a promotion. Anybody handles a promotion. You get evaluated on how you handle being overlooked, being blamed, being interrupted, being underpaid, being the one who fixed it and the one who did not get mentioned. The third property is that it runs long, months, sometimes years, long enough that the person being examined stops believing anything is being examined at all and settles into their actual character, which is exactly the point. A short test measures effort, a long test measures nature. And the fourth property, the one that hurts, is that the quiet audition looks identical to being forgotten. From the inside, there is no difference whatsoever between a season in which you are being carefully observed and a season in which nobody is thinking about you at all. None. That is why so many capable people fail it in the final months, not from bad character, but from exhaustion of hope. Chosen one, I want you to consider something now that may reframe several very painful years for you. The moments that damaged you most may have been the moments that qualified you most. I know how that sounds when a person is still bleeding from it, so let me say it more carefully. I am not telling you the injustice was good. I am not telling you it was arranged for your benefit. Injustice is injustice, and it costs what it costs. What I am telling you is this. You responded to it in a particular way, and that response was not consumed by the moment. It became part of you and part of your record, and there is no version of the story where the way you carried yourself in those months disappears without being counted. Think of David for a moment. He was anointed as a boy, in his own house, in front of his own family, and then he went back to the sheep, not to a palace, to the sheep, and after that, to a court where the king threw a spear at him twice, and after that, to a cave. There is a stretch of years in that account where a person who had already been publicly marked for the throne spent his time hiding in wilderness and being hunted by the man he had served faithfully. And twice in those years he had the man who was hunting him alone, unarmed, unaware, entirely at his mercy, and twice he did not take it. There was no audience in the cave. There was nobody to be impressed. There was only a man deciding, in the dark, what kind of king he was going to be before he ever became one. That was the audition, not the giant, the cave. Now let me tell you about a woman I worked with for a season, because I want this to be closer to your life than a story from a sacred text. She had been passed over for a director role in favor of someone she had personally trained. She told me the day it was announced she went to her car at lunch and cried for 11 minutes, then fixed her face and went back in and spent the afternoon writing documentation to help the person who got the role succeed. She did not do that because she is a saint. She told me plainly she did it because she could not stand the thought of a project failing on her watch, even a project that was no longer hers. That is not martyrdom. That is a standard that has become structural. 14 months later, a client who had been in the room during that transition left the company and started something new. The first call was to her, not to the director, to her. And when she asked why, he said a sentence she has never forgotten. He said, "I watched what you did after they gave your job to someone else, and I decided then that if I ever built anything, I wanted you in it." She had no idea he had noticed. He had never mentioned it. Not once, in 14 months. There is a fifth thing that gets logged, and it is the one almost nobody thinks about, so I want to name it before we move on. How you treat the people who can do nothing for you. The assistant, the person on the night shift, the junior who asked a question everyone else considered too basic to answer, the vendor whose name most people in your building have never bothered to learn. I have watched more elevations turn on this than on any technical qualification. And the reason is simple once you see it. How a person behaves towards someone with power over them tells you almost nothing because that behavior is strategic. How they behave towards someone with no power at all is the only unpolluted sample of their character available. And here is the part that should encourage you. Those interactions are the ones you have never once thought about afterward. You do not remember them because they cost you nothing and you were not performing, which means the record of them is entirely honest and entirely in your favor if you are the kind of person I believe you are. I sat with a man who had been elevated over 3 more senior colleagues, and he asked the person who chose him why, and the answer had nothing to do with results. The answer was that 11 years earlier, when this man was very junior and the person choosing him was a temporary contractor that nobody spoke to, he had made a point of learning her name and using it. She had never forgotten it. She had waited 11 years to be in a position to do something about it. Chosen one, that is the quiet audition, and it is running right now in your life, and it has been running for longer than you think. So let me give you something practical to do with this, because I refuse to hand you a beautiful idea and no instruction. For the next stretch of time, however long it is, I want you to hold your standard as though the person who decides your next chapter is in the room. Not because you are performing, because they might be, and because you would rather be the version of yourself you can defend later than win 11 minutes of relief now. Do not lower the quality of your work in a place that has stopped rewarding it. That is the single most expensive act of self-sabotage available to a person in your season, and it feels completely justified while you are doing it. Do not speak about the people who overlooked you in a way you would not want repeated. It will be repeated. It always is. Do not confuse restraint with weakness. The restraint you have been practicing for 2 years is not passivity. It is the most difficult discipline available to a competent person, which is doing excellent work in a place that does not deserve it, for reasons that have nothing to do with the place. And do not let anyone, including the voice inside your own head at 3 in the morning, tell you that those years were wasted. You were not being ignored, you were being read. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment, the sudden is a summons. Chosen one, as we move deeper into this revelation, I need you to let something be dismantled, because there is a belief you are carrying that is going to cost you the very thing you have been waiting for if we do not deal with it now. The belief is this: you think that when the moment comes, you will rise to it. Almost everyone believes that. It feels like confidence, it feels like faith, and it is the most quietly dangerous assumption a capable person can carry into a season like yours. Because you do not rise to the moment. Nobody rises to the moment. What actually happens on the day that matters is that you fall to the level of whatever condition you are already operating in. The moment does not lift you. The moment reveals where you already were. I want to give this a name so it stops being invisible. This is the preparation illusion. The preparation illusion is the belief that preparation and readiness are the same thing. They are not. They are 2 entirely different properties, and confusing them has cost more people more opportunities than any lack of qualification ever has. Preparation is what you have accumulated: skills, experience, knowledge, scar tissue, judgment. It is stored, it is permanent, and you have a great deal of it. Preparation is a warehouse. Readiness is what you can access at a specific moment on a specific day under specific conditions. It is not stored, it is a state, and it fluctuates enormously. A warehouse full of inventory does not help a customer standing at a counter if the doors are jammed and nobody can get to the shelves. And that is precisely what happens to prepared people in the sudden moments that matter most. The inventory is there. The access is not. Let me make this concrete because I want you to recognize it in your own history. Think of a conversation in the last 2 years where you knew the answer and could not produce it in the room. You knew it. 20 minutes later, driving, it arrived complete and obvious, and you felt something close to shame. Nothing about your preparation changed in those 20 minutes. What changed was access. Think of a moment where somebody said something to you that you should have questioned, and you nodded, and only later did you see exactly what was wrong with it. Your judgment did not fail. Your judgment was not available at the required speed. Think of a decision you made while tired at the end of a long day that you would never have made at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. Same person, same knowledge, different receiver. Chosen one, this is what I need you to hold with both hands. The sudden change we have been talking about is not going to arrive during a well-rested season on a day you have cleared your calendar for it. That is not how sudden works. It arrives on an ordinary afternoon, in the middle of an ordinary week, while you are carrying the ordinary weight. And the version of you that is available on that afternoon is the version that meets it. I want to stop for a moment and have you do something with your body, because I do not want this to stay in your head. Wherever you are, let your shoulders drop about an inch lower than they are right now. Most people are holding them higher than they realize. Now unclench your jaw. Notice that you had to do something to unclench it, which means it was clenched, which means it has probably been clenched for hours. Now take one breath that goes all the way down to the bottom, rather than stopping at the top of your chest. Just one. That small difference you just felt, that half a degree of clearing, is the same category of thing we are talking about. Nothing was added to you. Something was released, and what was already there became slightly more available. Hold that feeling, because it is the whole argument in miniature. Now let me take this somewhere that matters more, because there is an ancient distinction here that the English language flattens and loses. In Greek, there are two words for time. The first is chronos. Chronos is sequential time. It is the calendar, the clock, the hours accumulating one after another. It is measured, it is neutral, and it treats every hour as identical to every other hour. The second is kairos. Kairos is not a quantity, it is a quality. Kairos is the opportune moment, the right and appointed time, the window in which an action produces an effect it would not produce at any other point. Kairos does not last. That is the essential property of it. A kairos moment opens and then it closes. And the closing is not a punishment, it is simply the nature of windows. Now hear the implication for your life, because it is severe and it is liberating at the same time. You cannot schedule kairos. It is not yours to schedule. It arrives on its own terms. And this is why every anxious plan you have made about the timing of your next chapter has produced nothing but exhaustion. You have been trying to control the one variable that has never been available to you. But there is a second implication, and it is the one that actually helps. If you cannot control when the window opens, then everything, absolutely everything, depends on your condition when it does. Kairos does not check whether you were prepared over the past 10 years. Kairos checks whether you are awake on the afternoon it shows up. Think of the 10 young women in the account of the wedding, the ones waiting through the night for the bridegroom. All 10 were invited. All 10 were expecting him. All 10 fell asleep because the delay was long, and sleep is not a moral failure. The difference between the 5 who went in and the 5 who did not had nothing to do with belief or worthiness or how long they had waited. It came down to one thing: whether their lamps could produce light at the hour the call came. That is not a story about faith. That is a story about capacity at the moment of arrival. And here is the sentence I want to leave in you before we go further, because it changes what you should be spending your energy on for the rest of this season. You have spent years working on your preparation. Almost nobody works on their readiness. And readiness, not preparation, is what gets tested on the day your job changes suddenly. And suddenly is exactly the condition nobody rehearses for. Now I know the immediate question, because everyone asks it at exactly this point. What does working on readiness even mean? You cannot practice for an unknown event on an unknown date. You are right, you cannot, but that is not what readiness is. Readiness is not rehearsal. Readiness is the baseline condition of the instrument. It is how clearly you think on an average Tuesday, not how brilliantly you can perform when you are focused and rested and everything is aligned. Because the average Tuesday is when it happens, and a baseline can be raised. That is the whole point. That is the only genuinely controllable variable in this entire situation. And it is the one almost nobody touches, because almost nobody has been told that it is adjustable at all. We are moving toward what I promised you earlier, the thing that was worked out in a laboratory, The question I asked you to hold about whether something was taken from you. We are close now. But there is one more thing you need to understand first, because without it, what I am going to tell you next will sound like a solution to a problem you have not fully accepted that you have. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment. The sudden is a summons. Chosen one, as we enter this next unfolding, allow what heaven is showing you to settle deeply, because I am about to describe something you have felt for years and have never once said out loud to another human being. I want you to go back with me, further than the last 2 years. I want you to go back to being 9 or 10 years old. Think about how you learned then. Something was explained once, and you had it. You picked up a game, and you understood the rules by watching, not by being taught. You made things out of nothing, because making things was simply what a day was for. You could hold an entire imagined world in your head, with all its rules intact, and move through it without effort. You asked questions that made adults uncomfortable, because you had not yet learned which questions were not supposed to be asked. You were not exceptional in this. That is the part people get wrong. Every child is like that. That is the default condition of a human being before life does what life does. Now come forward. Somewhere between then and now, something changed, and it did not change all at once, which is exactly why you never noticed the day it happened. It went 1 degree at a time, a little more noise, a little less quiet, a little more managing, and a little less making. Years of holding responsibilities that never fully resolved. Years of sleep that was adequate rather than deep. Years of a mind that was never actually empty, not once, not for an entire waking day, because there was always the low background hum of something unfinished. And somewhere in there, without any announcement, the way you think stopped being the way you thought at 10. I want to be careful here, because I am not going to insult you with the standard explanation. The standard explanation is that this is just what growing up is. That children have that quality because they have no responsibilities, and adults lose it because life is heavy, and that is simply the trade. I do not believe that, and I do not think you do either, and here is the reason. If it were purely about responsibility, then the sharpest people you know would be the ones with the least on their shoulders. That is not what you observe. You know people carrying enormous weight who still think with startling clarity, and you know people with very little on them who cannot hold a thought for 90 seconds. Responsibility is not the variable. Something else is, and whatever it is, it has been operating on you, continuously, quietly, for a very long time, in a way you never consented to and were never informed about. I want to name what you have been experiencing, because the naming is what stops the self-blame. What has been happening to you is not decline. It is the slow subtraction. The slow subtraction has 3 properties, and every one of them is designed to keep you from ever protesting it. The first is that it moves below the threshold of noticing. A room that gets darker by 1 degree a week never triggers alarm, because at no point is today meaningfully different from yesterday. You only ever notice the total, and by the time the total is undeniable, it has been true for so long that it feels like your identity rather than your condition. The second is that it produces self-blame rather than investigation. Because it happened to you gradually and privately, and because nobody around you announced that it was happening to them too, you concluded that it was about you, about your discipline, about your character, about your age. A person investigating a problem asks what is causing this. A person blaming themselves asks what is wrong with me. Only one of those questions leads anywhere. And the third property is the cruelest. The slow subtraction takes the very instrument you would need in order to detect the slow subtraction. It reduces the clarity that would allow you to see clearly that your clarity has been reduced. Chosen one. That is why you have been so tired in a way that has never made sense to you. You have been running a diminished instrument at maximum effort and calling the resulting exhaustion a personal failing. Now let me show you what this has to do with everything we have been building toward, because this is the point where the whole message locks together. We established that your job is about to change suddenly. We established that suddenly is only the moment the invisible becomes visible. We establish the competence cage and the signal board and the quiet audition and the fact that the deciding variable is not the door, but the receiver. And now here is where those threads meet. The receiver has been under slow subtraction for 20 years, and the sudden window that is opening does not care. I want you to sit inside that for a moment rather than moving past it. Everything you have built, every year of preparation, every hard thing you survived, and every standard you held when nobody was watching, all of it has to pass through an instrument that has been quietly losing capacity for 2 decades on a day you do not get to choose, and it will land suddenly. That is not a reason for despair. I want to be very clear about that. It is the opposite. It is the first genuinely actionable piece of information in this entire situation, because everything else we have discussed is outside your control. You cannot schedule the window. You cannot make the room decide faster. You cannot force the door. But the condition of the receiver is not outside your control, and it never was. Now let me have you see something, because I want this to become concrete in your body rather than staying as an idea. Picture an ordinary Tuesday, 3 or 4 months from now. Nothing special about the day. You are tired in the normal way. The phone rings, or a message arrives, or someone stops by your desk with a question that is slightly larger than your role. Now picture 2 versions of what happens next. In the first, you hear it through fog. You process it a half-second slower than you should. You say, the safe thing, the deferring thing, the let me think about it thing, and the conversation moves on. And it is not until that evening that you understand fully what was being offered and exactly what you should have said. In the second, it lands clean. You see the shape of it immediately. You ask the one question that shows the person in front of you that you already understand what they are actually asking. And something shifts in the room, and they see you, and the whole trajectory of the next 5 years bends by a few degrees in that single exchange. Same person, same experience, same preparation, same day, one difference. Chosen one, if you want that second version, say receiving in the comments. I am not going to leave that as a picture. I promised you something specific, and we are almost there. But before I tell you what was worked out in that laboratory, I want to close one loop, because I told you at the beginning that I would explain why capable, sincere, prepared people miss the exact moments they have been waiting for. And I have given you the mechanism, but I have not given you the reason it goes unnoticed. Here it is. When a moment is missed because of fog, nothing happens. There is no event. Nobody tells you. The opportunity does not announce that it came and left. Life simply continues in the same shape, and you go on believing that nothing has been offered to you in a long time. The missed moments do not appear on any record. They are the most expensive thing in your entire life, and they leave no receipt. That is the real weight of what I am telling you tonight. Not that something might be taken. That something may already have passed through the room more than once. And that is exactly why the next part of this message matters more than anything I have said so far. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment. The sudden is a summons. Chosen one, as we continue into this next layer, let your spirit stay open, because before we go anywhere else, I owe you something practical, and I do not want you to leave this message with understanding and no instructions. A sudden change does not arrive into a vacuum, and suddenly is not the same thing as unannounced. It arrives into the exact life you are living on the day it lands. And there are 3 areas of that life that determine whether the change is something you can hold or something that flattens you. I have watched people receive the thing they prayed 10 years for and lose it inside 18 months, not because they could not do the work, but because the structure of their life could not carry the new weight. That is a grief I would not wish on anyone, and it is entirely avoidable. So, we are going to walk through the 3 areas, and I want you to be honest rather than defensive as we go. The first area is relationships. Every elevation reorganizes the people around you. That is not a curse, and it is not a punishment. It is physics. When your position changes, the terms on which people relate to you change, and some relationships were built entirely on terms that will no longer exist. Here is the part nobody prepares you for. The relationships that fall away are almost never the ones you expect. You brace for the obvious critics. The obvious critics usually stay. What falls away quietly and without confrontation is the friendship where your struggle was the shared ground. Some relationships are built on shared aspiration, and those survive elevation easily. Some are built on shared complaint. And a relationship built on shared complaint cannot survive one person leaving the complaint behind, because the moment you stop being stuck, the entire basis of the connection dissolves, and neither of you has language for what happened. I am not telling you to end anything. I am telling you to expect it, so that when it happens, you do not interpret it as betrayal or as evidence that success has changed you. It has not changed you. It has changed the terms, and some things were only ever built on the terms. The second area is energy. I want to be very direct here, because this is where most of the damage happens. You are currently running at a level of depletion that you have normalized. You have adjusted your entire life around the assumption that a Wednesday evening involves having nothing left. The new thing will not fit inside the leftover. Whatever is coming will require a version of you that has some margin. And margin is not something you find. It is something you build in advance by removing things. So here is the honest question. What are you currently spending energy on that produces nothing you value? Not what should you cut in some ideal world. What is genuinely, obviously, purely leakage? For most people I have asked, the answer includes at least two of the following. An ongoing conflict they are managing rather than resolving. A commitment they said yes to 18 months ago that no longer makes sense and that they have not cancelled because cancelling requires a conversation, a daily habit of consuming things that leave them agitated, and a low-grade financial disorder that produces a small hit of anxiety every time they think about it and which could be substantially resolved in one focused afternoon. Every one of those is a running process. Every one of them is drawing on the same reserve you will need on the Tuesday we talked about. Clear the schedule, repair the discipline, organize the finances, close the loop you have been leaving open, protect the first hour of your day from other people. Each of those is small. Together they are the difference between arriving at the appointed time with something in reserve and arriving already empty. Let me go one level deeper on energy, because most people hear this and nod and change nothing. There is a category of drain that almost nobody counts, and it is by far the largest one. It is the energy consumed by open loops. An open loop is anything unfinished that your mind has not been able to close. A conversation you know you need to have and keep postponing. A decision you have half made. A message you have not answered because answering it properly requires more than you have. A commitment you have privately withdrawn from but have not told anyone about. Each open loop costs something continuously, not occasionally. Your mind checks it, not consciously and not usefully. It simply returns to it several times a day, confirms that it is still unresolved, and moves on. And each of those returns costs a small amount of the same resource you need for clear thinking. Most people in your position are carrying between 6 and 12 open loops at any given time, and the total cost of maintaining them is enormous and completely invisible, because no single loop feels expensive. So here is the instruction, and it is more powerful than it sounds. Write every open loop down, all of them, on one page, including the small embarrassing ones. Then close 3 this week. Not the 3 most important, the 3 easiest. You will feel a change out of all proportion to what you actually did. That is not a psychological trick. That is what happens when a mind stops running maintenance on things it can finally stop checking. The third area is time, and this one is the least discussed and the most decisive. You do not currently have any unstructured thinking time, and you have not had any for years. I say that with confidence because almost nobody in your position does. Every gap in your day has been filled with something that occupies the mind without engaging it. And this matters enormously, for a reason most people have never considered. The kind of insight that changes a trajectory does not arrive during focused effort. It arrives in the space after focused effort, when the mind is free but not empty. Everyone knows this experientially. It is why the answer comes in the shower, on the walk, in the 20 minutes of driving with no radio. A life with no such space is a life in which insight has nowhere to land. You can be as prepared as any human being alive and still receive nothing, simply because there is no unoccupied surface for anything to arrive on. Think of Nehemiah for a moment. He was a cupbearer to a foreign king, which is to say, he had a good job serving somebody else's agenda in a place that was not his home. And the account says that when he heard the news about the broken walls of the city, he sat down and wept and mourned for days. And then he fasted and prayed, days, before he did anything at all. And then, when the king finally noticed his face and asked what was wrong, Nehemiah had an answer ready. Not a feeling, a plan, timber quantities, letters of passage, a timeline. He asked for specifics in a single conversation because the specifics had been formed in the days when he was doing nothing that looked productive. That conversation lasted minutes. The preparation for it took months of what most people would have called wasted time. Chosen one, I want you to hear the pattern in that, because it is the same pattern as everything else we have discussed tonight. The moment was sudden, the readiness was not. So let me give you the instruction plainly. Between now and whenever your window opens, build one protected space in your week where nothing is consumed and nothing is produced. 30 minutes. A walk with no headphones. A drive with no sound. Sitting in one chair with the phone in another room. You will hate the first 3 times you do it. Your mind will produce an extraordinary quantity of noise for the first 10 minutes, and you will conclude it is not working. It is working. That noise is the backlog clearing, and it has to move through before anything else can move in. And here is what I want you to notice. On the 4th or 5th time, something will surface that you did not go looking for. A name, a connection between 2 things you had never placed side by side. A sentence you needed. That is not mysticism. That is what a mind does when it is finally given the conditions to do it. Now, let me be honest with you about the limitation of everything I have just said, because I would rather tell you the truth than sell you a tidy solution. Everything in these 3 areas is about clearing obstruction, removing leakage, making space, and clearing obstruction is genuinely powerful, and I would tell you to do it even if there were nothing else available to you. But clearing obstruction does not restore capacity that was subtracted. It gives you full access to whatever you currently have. It does not give you back what the slow subtraction took. And that is a different problem entirely, requiring a different kind of answer. And it is the answer I have been holding since the beginning of this message. We are there now. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment. The sudden is a summons. Chosen one, as we move into this next flow, let what comes now go somewhere permanent, because I am going to hand you a tool that you are going to need within months, and possibly within weeks. I told you at the beginning that 2 doors were going to open, and that they would open close enough together that they would feel like a single decision. I want to make good on that now, because getting this wrong is the most common way a person loses the thing that was arranged for them. Here is the shape of it. When a sudden change begins to land, it almost never presents as one clear option. It presents as 2. And the 2 are not good and evil, which would be easy. They are safe and correct. The safe door is familiar. It is a lateral move, or a slightly better version of what you already do, or a counteroffer from the place you were about to leave. It arrives with reassurance attached. It requires no explanation to your family. It carries almost no risk of public failure. The correct door is unfamiliar. It usually requires something you have not done before. It often pays the same or less at the start. It arrives with fear attached rather than reassurance. And the fear is not a warning, it is simply the sensation of a system encountering an unmapped route. And here is why people take the safe door. In the moment of decision, fear and wrongness produce almost identical physical sensations. Almost identical. A tightening, a reluctance, a sense of no. And unless you have a way to tell them apart, you will read fear as discernment, and walk through the wrong door with a clear conscience. So let me give you the 4 questions. I want you to write them down because you will not remember them when you need them, and the moment you will need them will arrive suddenly and will not announce itself as the moment. This is the 2-door test. Question 1. Which door did you know about first? There is a phenomenon I have watched too many times to dismiss. The correct door is almost always the one that appeared first, in a smaller form, weeks or months before the actual decision, a conversation, a stray thought, a name you noted, and the safe door usually appears late, quickly, and with urgency attached. Urgency in the arrival is worth paying attention to. A thing that requires you to decide immediately is usually protecting itself from your consideration. Go back and ask which of these 2 possibilities has been in your awareness longer. That is data, and most people never think to look at it. Question 2. Which door requires you to become someone, and which one requires you to keep being who you already are? Both answers can be legitimate. Sometimes the season is one of consolidation, and the right move is genuinely the one that lets you stay as you are, but you must know which one you are choosing. Here is the distinguishing question underneath it. Ask yourself, if I take this door, who am I in 3 years? If the answer is a slightly older version of exactly who I am now, you are looking at the safe door, and you should choose it with open eyes rather than by accident. Question 3. Which fear is it? This is the one that matters most, so slow down here. There are 2 entirely different fears, and they feel nearly the same in the body. The first is the fear of exposure. It says, I might not be able to do this. People will see. I will be found out. That fear is almost always attached to the correct door, because the correct door always requires an untested capacity. The second is the fear of violation. It is quieter. It does not say, I might fail. It says, something is not right here. It is usually attached to a specific detail you noticed and dismissed. The way somebody spoke about a former employee, an inconsistency between 2 things you were told, a pressure to move fast that had no logical basis. Fear of exposure says, I am not enough. Fear of violation says, this is not clean. You must learn to separate those 2, because they lead in opposite directions. Fear of exposure is almost always a signal to proceed. Fear of violation is almost always a signal to stop. And a person who cannot tell them apart will either walk into every trap or refuse every genuine opportunity, and both of those lives are tragedies. Question 4. Which door can you explain to yourself without using the word should? Listen to your own language when you talk about each option. If the sentences you use to justify one of them lean heavily on should, or on what a reasonable person would do, or on what anyone in my position obviously has to choose, you are not reasoning. You are managing the expectations of an imagined audience. The correct door tends to produce sentences that begin with, I want, or I have known for a while, or there is something in this I need to find out. The safe door tends to produce sentences that begin with, I should, or it would be irresponsible not to, or what would people think? Now let me be careful, because I am not telling you that the safe door is always wrong. That is exactly the kind of reckless advice that ruins people who have families depending on them. There are seasons where the safe door is genuinely the correct door, and there are obligations that are not negotiable. And I would never tell a person carrying real responsibility to leap on the basis of a feeling. What I am telling you is that you should know which door you are walking through and why, rather than discovering in 5 years that you chose by default and called it prudence. Chosen one. Most people do not choose the safe door. They drift into it and then construct the reasoning afterward. Now I want to tell you about something that happened to a man I sat with, because the 4 questions came out of watching people like him. He had been at the same firm for 15 years. In the space of about 3 weeks, 2 things happened. His own company offered him a title change with a modest raise, which he had wanted for years. And a former colleague, someone he had barely spoken to in a decade, called and described something being built and asked whether he would want to be part of it. He told me the second call frightened him so badly that he did not sleep that night. The first offer produced no reaction at all beyond mild relief. He went with the title change. He told himself it was the responsible decision, and by every ordinary measure it was. 18 months later, the thing his former colleague built was the largest professional success of anyone he had ever worked with, and he was still in the same building, doing the same work, with a slightly different sign on his door. And here is what he said to me, which is the reason I am telling you this at all. He did not say I made the wrong choice. He said something more precise and more painful. He said, I never actually made a choice. I reacted to the fear, and then I spent a year explaining to myself why the reaction was wisdom. That is the sentence I want to protect you from. Not the wrong outcome, the absence of a real decision. Now hear how all of this connects back to everything we have built tonight. The two-door test requires something specific from you. It requires that you can tell the difference between two fears that feel almost identical in the body. It requires that you can hear your own language accurately while you are speaking it. It requires that you can look at a situation and see which detail is the one that matters. Every one of those is a function of the receiver. A clear mind runs the two-door test in about a minute. A foggy mind cannot run it at all, no matter how many times it has heard the questions, because the entire test is an act of perception, and perception is exactly what has been subtracted. Chosen one, this is why I have not given you the answer yet, and why I have made you wait through so much of this message before I do. You needed to see the size of the problem first, not to frighten you, so that when I tell you what was worked out in that laboratory, you understand precisely what it is for, and you do not mistake it for a small convenience. It is not a small convenience. It is the difference between running every one of these tools at full capacity on the day it matters, and knowing all of them perfectly and being unable to reach any of them. We are ready now. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment. The sudden is a summons. Chosen one, I want to close the loop that has been open since early in this message, because I told you there was something worked out in research laboratories that I would come back to, and I want to tell you why. I waited until this exact moment to bring it forward. What they found is not information. What they found is a repair, and a repair only becomes useful once a person understands the full shape of the thing it repairs. You now understand the shape, but before I describe it, there is one more piece of ground I have to cover with you, and it is the piece that makes people angry once they see it clearly. I asked you earlier to hold a question. What if the fog is not age and not a character flaw? What if something was taken from you? I want to answer that now, and I want to answer it honestly rather than dramatically. Something was taken, not by a person, not by a conspiracy of individuals in a room somewhere, by an environment, by a way of living that every one of us was born into and none of us designed, which systematically and continuously does one specific thing to the human mind, and does it so consistently that we mistook the result for normal adulthood. Here is what I mean, and I want to be precise. The mind you were given operates best under a set of conditions that essentially no longer exist for anyone. Long, uninterrupted stretches, silence that lasts more than a few minutes, physical movement, sleep that is deep rather than merely sufficient, boredom, which is the state most people now go their entire adult lives without experiencing for even 1 hour. Now consider the actual conditions of the last 20 years of your life. Interruption every few minutes, input from the moment your eyes open, a mind that is never allowed to complete a full cycle of anything before the next thing arrives. Constant low-grade division of attention across 4 or 5 open concerns that never fully close. Nobody designed that to harm you, but it does what it does, whether or not anyone intended it, and it has been doing it to you every day for 2 decades. And here is the part that should genuinely provoke something in you. You were never told. At no point did anyone say, by the way we all live now is going to reduce something in you gradually, and you will not notice, and you will conclude it is your fault. Instead, the message you received, over and over, was that if you were struggling, you should try harder, manage your time better, be more disciplined. And you, being the kind of person who takes responsibility, believed it and blamed yourself for 20 years. Chosen one, I want to say this as plainly as I know how. You did not lose your mind through weakness. Something was subtracted from you by the conditions of ordinary life, and calling that a personal failing is one of the great quiet injustices of our lifetime. If you have felt that in your bones for years without words for it, comment yes. Now, there is a difference between grieving what was taken and knowing whether it can come back. And that second question is the only one that actually matters at this point in your life. Let me put it in the frame we have been building all night. Your sudden is coming. We have established that. Your preparation is finished. We have established that too. Every tool I have given you tonight, the signal board, the two-door test, the reading of the quiet audition, all of it depends on one instrument being available on a day you cannot schedule. So the entire question of your next 5 years reduces to something startlingly small. Can the instrument be restored? Or do you walk into your appointed time operating at whatever fraction the last 20 years left you with? I would not have built this whole message toward that question if I did not have an answer for it. But here is what most messages like this never say, and I want to say it before I go on. Everything I have told you up to this point is true, and every one of these tools works. And without what comes next, they will work at a fraction of their capacity, because a tool is only as good as the hand that can reach it. So let me now say the plain part. No metaphor, no imagery, just the shape of it, because you deserve to see this without decoration before you decide anything about it. The why is this. A sudden change in your work is approaching, and it will be sudden in exactly the way we have described. And the thing that determines whether it lands as extraction or as subtraction is not the change itself. It is your capacity to perceive and respond clearly during the specific window when it happens. That window is short, it is unscheduled, and it will not repeat in the same form. The what is this? Your capacity to perceive and respond clearly is not fixed and is not a matter of character. It is a physiological state. It has been degraded gradually by the conditions of modern life, and unlike most things that get degraded over 20 years, it responds to a specific kind of intervention faster than almost anybody expects. And the who is this. This is not for everyone listening to me tonight. Some people hearing this are in a genuinely different season, and nothing about it applies to them. It is for the person who recognized themselves in the competence cage, who has been on the incubation floor and kept watering the dirt, who ran the 4 measurements earlier and flinched at the answers. Who knows, with the part of them that does not lie, that there is a version of their own mind that has gone quiet and that they have been mourning it privately for years without ever telling a single person. If that is you, then what I am about to describe was built for a problem you have, not a problem in general, yours. And I want to be honest about what it is not, before I tell you what it is. It is not a replacement for anything sacred. It does not do the obeying for you. It does not make the decision for you. It does not close a door or open one. What God is doing in you is not conditional on any tool that any human being has ever built, and I would never suggest otherwise. What it does is narrower than that, and in your particular situation, more useful than almost anything else available. You now know what has been blocking you. The mechanism is clear. The door is visible. The only question left is what you do with a receiver that has been running at half capacity for 20 years. On the week the window opens. Chosen one. The sudden is not a punishment. The sudden is a summons. Chosen one. Do you remember the question I asked you to hold near the beginning of this message? Here is the answer. It won a Nobel Prize. In 1981, a researcher named Dr. Roger Sperry received the Nobel Prize for work that had been going on quietly for decades. What he established, working with patients whose 2 brain hemispheres had been surgically separated, was something that sounds obvious once you hear it, and was not obvious at all before he proved it. The 2 halves of the human brain are not redundant. They are specialists, and they were designed to operate together, in synchrony, exchanging information continuously so that the whole instrument functions as one thing rather than two. When that synchronization is intact, a specific state becomes available. Ideas arrive complete rather than assembled. Pattern and detail are visible at the same time. The gap between perceiving a situation and knowing what to do about it collapses to almost nothing. You do not think your way to the answer. The answer is simply present. You have been in that state before. Everyone has. It is the state you were in for most of your childhood, and it is the state you drop into occasionally as an adult, usually for an hour, usually without knowing why it happened or how to get back. Here is the finding that changes how you should read your entire life. Studies of creative capacity in children put roughly 98% of them at what researchers classify as the genius level. In adults, fewer than 1 in 1,000 still measure there. Read that again. 98%. Fewer than 1 in 1,000. That is not a story about talent being rare. That is a story about something nearly universal being lost in almost everyone, somewhere between childhood and now. And it is not lost through moral failure. It is lost because the synchronization degrades under exactly the conditions we discussed. Interruption, noise, divided attention, 20 years of it. The capacity was not removed. The connection between the halves was disrupted, which is a completely different problem, and importantly, a repairable one. Now let me tell you about two people, and then I will tell you what changed for them. A woman in California described her life before this in a way that stopped me. She said she had done everything her faith had asked of her. Prayer, journaling, service, years of it, sincerely. And she kept arriving at the same experience. She believed the words. She could not feel the reality behind them, not in her body, not in the actual texture of her days. She said it was like tuning a radio perfectly and hearing static anyway. After about 10 days of using what I am going to describe, something cleared. She used the word channel. She said a channel that had been closed was suddenly open, not because she tried harder, because the receiver had been repaired. A man in Texas described something different and more practical. He had spent years holding everything together for everyone around him while his own interior life got thin. He said his work had become a series of decisions he was making at half speed, and he had stopped noticing because there was nothing to compare it to. 2 weeks in, he woke up one morning and described his mind as running on all of what it was supposed to run on. The fog that had been so constant that he had stopped registering it as fog was simply not there. Both of them were describing the same thing from two directions. That is because of what the team I am about to describe actually built. A group of neuroscientists led by Dr. Daniel Barone, a neurologist in New York, spent years on a single problem. Clinical protocols that restore hemisphere synchronization already existed. They were used in specialized settings, but they took over an hour per session. They required equipment, and they were entirely out of reach for ordinary people. So they took that clinical protocol and, through an intensive process of compression and refinement, reduced it into an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. 8 minutes, headphones, eyes closed. That is the entirety of what is required of you. They call it the Genius Switch. The Genius Switch is not a meditation app. It is not a track designed to put you in a pleasant mood. It is not one of the audio files people download by the thousand, hoping something will happen. It is a targeted auditory sequence engineered specifically on the Nobel research of Dr. Sperry to restore the synchronization between the two hemispheres that was the default condition of your mind in childhood. If you have tried the ordinary audio tracks before and found them underwhelming, Dr. Barone addresses that directly, and his answer is not defensive. Those tracks target one narrow slice of the picture. Sound alone is incomplete. What his team built targets the synchronization itself, at the whole brain level, through a layered protocol developed over years of clinical refinement. Different mechanism, different category of result. And you do not have to do anything. That is the part that takes people the longest to accept. No mantra, no visualization, no discipline required. It operates beneath your awareness, while you sit with your eyes closed. If you miss a day, you simply resume the next day. Now let me say something that matters more than anything technical I have just told you. The genius switch is not for everyone. It is for the person who understands that God prepared not only the promise, but the mind that has to walk into it. The person who has been sincere for years, who did the work in the room where nobody was watching, who kept the standard when the standard was not being rewarded, and who is finally willing to stop treating the fog as a character flaw and start treating it as a condition with a specific address. Most people who hear this will scroll past within seconds. They have already accepted the reduced version of their own mind as permanent, and there is a kind of peace in that acceptance that I will not pretend does not exist. You are still here. You have been here for a long time now. That is not coincidence. That is the exact quality of persistence that belongs to the person this was built for. Let me tell you what it costs, because I am not going to make you go looking for it. Colleagues who reviewed it told Dr. Barone it would be reasonable value at $500, and given the comparison, that is not an unreasonable statement. In-person neurofeedback runs about $300 an hour. A home unit runs around $7,000. It was not released at $500. It was not released at $200 or $100. It was released at $49. And on the page where his team made it available, there is an additional $10 off, $39. One time. Lifetime access, delivered to your email immediately, nothing shipped and nothing to wait for. 4 things come with it at that price. A guided visualization from a top-rated creator on the Calm app. A grocery guide identifying the common foods that contribute to mental fog, along with the shortcuts that save most households over $100 a month. A manifestation text more than a century old that most modern teaching quietly borrows from, which sells for around $20 on its own. And a printable summary of the 5 habits that most reliably shape a future worth walking into. And all of it sits behind a complete money-back guarantee. Listen to it once. Listen to it 80 times. If it does not do for you what it has done for more than 18,000 people, every dollar comes back. No conditions attached and no questions asked. Now let me tell you why I am putting this in front of you tonight specifically, rather than in some general way. The provision that has already been arranged for you becomes visible in the synchronized state in a way that it simply does not in the partial state. Not because the provision is new, because the receiver that can recognize it has been restored. What is coming suddenly toward your work is already in motion. The only open question is whether you arrive at the meeting point with the instrument online on the day it happens suddenly. One thing worth naming plainly: if you go searching for anything with a similar name, you will find files. The team looked at them. Almost none contain the actual protocol. They carry a name because naming something costs nothing. The mechanism is the entire difference, and the mechanism only exists in what his team built. The direct page is the only verified source. So if your spirit confirms what has been described here, the link is in the description below and in the pinned comment. That is where Dr. Barone and his team made it available, and nowhere else. Everything is laid out on that page. Read all of it before you decide anything. And then let me say the thing that matters more. A tool does not replace God. A tool does not obey for you. It does not surrender for you, and it does not walk through the door on your behalf. What is being done in you is not conditional on anything anyone sells, but a tool that restores the receiver, gives what God is doing more of what it was designed to land in. That is all I will say about it. The rest of what remains in this message belongs entirely to something else. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment, the sudden is a summons. Chosen one, as we move into this next unfolding, let the weight of what heaven is showing you settle, because we are returning now to the deepest current of this message, and it goes somewhere I have not taken you yet. I want to tell you where the sudden actually originates, because every sudden change has an origin. Not the paperwork, not the announcement, the origin. Every position that ever opened for anyone opened because of a conversation in a room. And here is what almost nobody considers. You are not in that room. You have never been in that room. You will probably never know it happened. Somewhere, at some point in the last year, your name was said out loud by one person to another person, in a context you were not part of, about a possibility you did not know existed. That is not a comforting thought. That is a mechanical description of how every elevation in the history of human work has actually occurred. Somebody says a name, somebody else asks about it, and suddenly, from the outside, a trajectory bends. Now I want you to consider what determines whether your name is the one that gets said, because it is not what most people assume. It is not who is loudest. Loud names get remembered in the wrong category. It is not who is most senior, because seniority is already accounted for and produces no new information. And it is not, I am sorry to tell you, simply who is best at the work, because competence is assumed at a certain level and stops being a differentiator. What gets a name said in a room you are not in is a specific kind of memory. It is the memory of how a person made someone feel about a situation that was difficult, not how they performed, how they made the difficulty feel. When somebody thinks of you, what returns to them first is not a list of your accomplishments. It is a sensation, steady or exhausting, sharp or defensive, clear or complicated. And that sensation is what gets attached to your name when your name comes up in a conversation about who could handle something hard. Chosen one, that means the last 2 years of your life, the ones you have written off as wasted, have been generating exactly the material that gets names spoken. I want to give this its name because it is the mechanism underneath everything we have talked about tonight. This is the room that says your name. Here is what makes it so difficult to live inside. The room operates on a delay that is completely invisible to the person being discussed. Your name may have been said 11 months ago. The decision it produced may still be forming. And in every one of those 11 months you experienced silence, and you interpreted the silence as absence, because silence is the only evidence available to a person who is not in the room. Think of Esther for a moment. She was taken into a palace under circumstances she did not choose, in a position she did not apply for, in a life that had been arranged around her by forces entirely outside her control. And for a long stretch of that account, nothing appears to be happening. She is simply there, positioned. And then a crisis arrives, and a single sentence gets spoken to her by a man who had been watching her from outside the walls. Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Notice the structure of it. The positioning happened years before the purpose was revealed. She did not know why she was where she was. She could not have known. The room that said her name had been operating long before she had any evidence of it. And think of Daniel, who served under one kingdom, and then under a completely different kingdom after the first one fell, and then was elevated again by rulers who had every reason to discard everything associated with the previous regime. 3 times, across 3 administrations, somebody in a room said his name, not because he lobbied, because when the difficult thing arrived, somebody remembered how it had felt to hand him a problem. And think of Gideon, threshing wheat in a winepress, hiding, doing agricultural work in the wrong place because he was afraid. And the greeting he received was, "The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor." He was not mighty. He was hiding in a hole. He was addressed by what the room already knew about him and what he did not know about himself. Now, let me tell you the other side of this, because I would be doing you no favors if I only described how a name gets said. There are 3 things that get a name quietly removed from consideration, and none of them are failures of ability. The first is a reputation for being difficult to give feedback to. If a person becomes known as someone who reacts badly to correction, they stop being told things. And a person who stops being told things stops being considered for anything where they would need to be told things, which is every position of consequence that exists. The second is inconsistency between how somebody speaks about their work in public and how they speak about it in private. People notice this faster than anyone believes. One conversation where you speak dismissively about something you praised in the meeting and a small permanent note is made. The third is a pattern of describing every difficulty as something that was done to you. There is a way of telling the story of a hard season that leaves the teller entirely without agency, and it is understandable, and it is often accurate, and it is quietly disqualifying. People assessing you for a larger role are asking one question underneath all the others. If this goes wrong, will this person look for the cause or for the culprit? I am not telling you to pretend you were not wronged. You were. I am telling you that how you narrate it is being recorded alongside everything else. Chosen one, I want to say the thing this is all pointing toward. You are being addressed right now by something that knows more about your next chapter than you do. And I want to give you something that will hold you in the months between now and the announcement, because those months are where people break. When the silence comes, do not read it as absence. Read it as delay between a decision and its paperwork. When someone less capable moves ahead of you, do not read it as a verdict on your value. Read it as evidence that you are being held for something that has not opened yet. When a door closes without explanation, do not read it as rejection. Read it as a redirection whose reasoning you will be given later, in full, and will find embarrassingly obvious in hindsight. When you feel forgotten, do not read it as being forgotten. Read it as the interval every single person in every account we have ever revered had to survive without evidence. And when nothing at all seems to be happening, remember the bamboo. And remember that the loudest growth in your entire life so far has made no sound above the surface. If that landed somewhere real, comment "room" below. Now let me tell you something before this message ends, because I am going to speak something specific over your work and your name near the end of our time, and I want you to stay for it. But before that, there is one more thing I need to give you. It is the most concrete thing I will say tonight, and I have deliberately held it until now, because it is the piece that people are least ready to hear early. It has to do with a ceiling, not the ceiling of your role, a different one, older than your career, that has been in your family longer than you have been alive, and that has quietly determined the outer edge of every financial expectation you have ever allowed yourself to hold. We are going to look at it directly, and then I am going to close this the way it should be closed. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment, the sudden is a summons. Chosen one, as we move into this final unfolding of the message, let your spirit recognize the magnitude of what is being uncovered, because we are about to go to the most concrete place we have been all night. I want to talk about money, not abstractly, not as provision or abundance or increase, which are the words people in rooms like this one use when they want to talk about money without saying it directly. Because there is a number in your life, you know exactly what it is. It is the figure your income has hovered around, plus or minus a little, for years. It has moved with inflation and with title changes, but the shape of it has stayed remarkably stable. And every time it has approached a genuinely different order of magnitude, something has happened. A deal fell through, a role changed, a circumstance arrived, or you found a reason not to pursue the thing that would have crossed it. I want you to name that number in your head right now, not out loud, just name it. Now let me tell you where that number actually came from, because it did not come from your ability, and it did not come from the market, and it certainly did not come from what your work is worth. It came from the highest financial altitude that anyone in your family successfully occupied and survived. I want to give this its name, because you have been living underneath it your entire adult life without ever once seeing it. This is the inherited ceiling. Every one of us grew up receiving a continuous education in what is financially possible for people like us. Nobody sat you down and taught it. That is not how it transmits. It transmits through the tone of voice used when bills arrived, through what was said about people who had more, through whether money was discussed openly or in a lowered voice in the next room, through the specific tightness in a parent face at a particular time of the month. By the time you were 11 or 12, you had absorbed a complete and detailed model of what is normal, what is greedy, what is reckless, what is safe, and what is simply not for people like us. And that model has been operating in you every day since, below the level where you can argue with it. Now, here is the part that should genuinely interest you, because this is not a story about self-esteem. The inherited ceiling does not stop you by making you lazy or by making you doubt yourself, those you would notice and fight. It stops you through a much more sophisticated mechanism. It makes certain options invisible. When an opportunity appears that would take you meaningfully past the ceiling, you do not consider it and reject it. You do not see it as an option at all. Your mind classifies it, in a fraction of a second and entirely below awareness, as not the kind of thing that happens to someone like me, and it never enters the set of things you are actually choosing between. That is why you cannot solve this by trying harder. You cannot pursue an option that never appeared on your list. And this is where everything we have said tonight comes together in the most practical possible way. Because the sudden change that is coming toward your work, and it will be sudden, is very likely to arrive as exactly that kind of option, larger than the pattern, outside the family altitude. The sort of thing that, if you described it to the people who raised you, would produce a silence and then a question about whether it is really safe. Chosen one. If the ceiling is intact on the day that arrives, you will not turn it down. Something worse will happen. You will not fully see it. So let me give you the way through it, because I am not going to name a trap and leave you inside it. The first thing is to say the number out loud to one person. That sounds too simple to matter. It is not. The inherited ceiling survives entirely on being unexamined. The moment you state the figure and say the sentence, "I have not crossed this in 11 years, and I do not think it is because of my ability," the whole structure becomes visible, and a visible ceiling is a fundamentally different object from an invisible one. The second is to identify whose ceiling it actually is. Go back and find the person. Almost always there is one specific individual whose financial life set the boundary. A father, a grandmother, whoever was the highest and most respected earner in the family. And then ask the question that will take you a few days to answer honestly. What did that person believe about money that I absorbed without examining? The third is the one that produces the most relief, so stay with me for it. You must give yourself permission to exceed them without betraying them, because that is what is actually holding the ceiling in place. Not fear of money, loyalty. Somewhere in you is a belief, absolutely unspoken, that going substantially past what they achieved would be a kind of statement about them. That it would imply they could have done more. That it would put a distance between you and the people whose sacrifices built the floor you are standing on. I want you to hear this carefully, because it is the release point. Everything they did was to raise the floor, not to set the ceiling. No one who ever sacrificed for you did it hoping you would stop where they stopped. The ceiling was never the gift. The floor was the gift, and the floor is why you are able to see further than they could. Exceeding them is not a betrayal. It is the completion of what they started. It is the only outcome that makes the price they paid make sense. Think of Ruth again, gleaning in the corners of a field, because that was what was available to a foreign widow, which is to say, occupying the lowest financial position her society had. And by the end of that account, she is not gleaning at the edge of the field. She owns the field through a man who noticed her, and her name enters a lineage that runs directly to a king and beyond. Nothing in Ruth changed except her position. The same woman who was picking up leftovers became the woman standing on the land, and the mechanism of the change was not effort. She was already working as hard as a human being can work. The mechanism was sudden recognition. Somebody with the authority to change her position looked at her and understood what he was looking at. And think of the widow with the small jar of oil, told to gather vessels from all her neighbors, as many as she could find, and pour. And the oil kept flowing until the vessels ran out. Read that ending precisely, because most people miss it. The supply did not stop because the source was exhausted. It stopped because she ran out of containers. Chosen one, that is the entire teaching of tonight in a single image. The provision was not the limiting factor. The capacity to receive it was. Now I want you to do something specific this week, and it will be uncomfortable, which is how you will know it is the right instruction. Write down a figure that is meaningfully beyond your ceiling, not a fantasy number, A number that is plausible for someone doing what you do at the highest level of it, that you have simply never allowed yourself to write down. Sit with the reaction. There will be one. Notice whether the reaction is fear of exposure or fear of violation, because we have already learned to tell those apart, and this one is always exposure. And then ask the question that opens the door. If that figure were normal for someone like me, what would I be doing differently on Monday morning? The answer will come faster than you expect, and it will be specific, and it will be something you have known for a long time and have not acted on because it lives above the ceiling. And for anyone who felt something shift when the mind was mentioned earlier tonight, that door is still open in the description. It is a small step, but small steps taken from a clear mind have changed entire seasons, and a ceiling is much easier to see through an instrument that is working properly. Chosen one, the sudden is not a punishment, the sudden is a summons. Chosen one, as we move deeper still, I want to take you forward rather than backward, because there is a stretch of time coming that almost nobody prepares for, and that decides everything. I want to walk you through the first 90 days after the sudden change lands, not the day the sudden lands, the 90 days after, because that is where the real test is, and almost every piece of advice a person receives is about the wrong part. Let me show you the sequence, because it is remarkably consistent. In the first week, you will feel something close to euphoria, and it will not be about the position, it will be relief. The relief of a question being answered after years of carrying it unanswered. Enjoy that week. It is genuine, and you earned it. In the second and third week, the euphoria will drop out and be replaced by something that will frighten you. You will feel like a fraud, not mildly, specifically. You will look at the room you are now in, and a voice will say, "They made a mistake, and someone is going to notice." I need you to hear this before it happens, so write it somewhere. That feeling is not information. It is the standard physiological response of a nervous system operating in an environment where its previous maps do not apply. It arrives in the second or third week in essentially everyone, including the people in that room who look completely at ease, and it means nothing about your fitness for the position. Around week 5 or 6 comes the first real test, and it is not a test of competence. Somebody will do something in the new environment that reminds you of the old one. A dismissive comment, a meeting you were not invited to, a decision made without you, and in that moment, there will be an enormous pull to conclude that nothing has actually changed, that this place is like the last place, that you traded one cage for another. Do not conclude that in week 6. You cannot read an environment from a single data point in your first 6 weeks, and the version of you that is still carrying the residue of the last decade is not a neutral instrument. Give it 90 days before you form a verdict on the culture, and then somewhere between week 8 and week 12, if you have held steady, something specific happens that I want you to watch for, because it is the moment the change actually completes. Somebody in the new room will bring you a problem that is not in your job description. It will come casually, and it will be a problem they could have taken elsewhere. That is the moment, not the offer letter, not the announcement. That is the moment you have been genuinely absorbed, because a person only brings you a problem outside your remit when they have decided, internally, that you are one of the people they think with. There is also one conversation you should have in the first month, and almost nobody thinks to have it. Find the person who brought you in, the one who advocated for you in the room, and ask them a single question. What made you decide it should be me? Most people never ask this, because it feels like fishing for a compliment. It is not. It is the most valuable piece of information available to you in your first year, and you will only be able to get it in that first month, because after that, the answer will have been rewritten by everything that has happened since. What you are actually asking is what they think your specific value is, and here is the thing that will surprise you. It is almost never what you assumed. 9 times out of 10, the reason somebody was chosen is not the reason they believe they were chosen. You may think you were brought in for your technical depth and discover you were brought in because of how you handle a room when it is going badly. You may think you were brought in for your experience and discover it was for a specific judgment call you made 4 years ago that somebody witnessed and never mentioned. Knowing the real answer changes how you spend your first year. Without it, you will spend that year defending a strength nobody hired you for while neglecting the one they actually need. Now let me tell you the 3 things that will damage you in those 90 days, because forewarned is most of the defense. The first is the compulsion to prove the decision was right. You will feel a pressure to justify the confidence somebody placed in you, and it will express itself as taking on too much, too fast, saying yes to everything, and burning through your reserve in the first 8 weeks. Resist it. Nobody who elevated you expects a demonstration in month 1. They expect you to still be functioning in month 12. The second is the temptation to explain the old place. You will find yourself in conversation with new colleagues, describing what you came from. Be very careful with this. Everything you say about a previous environment tells the new one how you will speak about them one day. Say less than you want to, considerably less. And the third, which is the quiet one, is neglecting the practice that got you here. Whatever you were doing in the underground years, the discipline, the standard, the protected space, the honest self-assessment, there will be a strong pull to abandon it now that the outcome has arrived. Do not. The practice was not a means to the position. The practice is the reason you can hold the position. Now let me have you see something. I want you to picture it in specific detail rather than in general, because vague imagination changes nothing and precise imagination changes a great deal. Picture a morning about 6 months from now. You wake up before the alarm, not because you are anxious, but because your body finished sleeping. There is no weight sitting behind your eyes. You lie there for a moment and notice the absence of the thing that used to be there every morning. And the absence is so unfamiliar that you have to check for it. You get up, you go somewhere and do work that requires all of you. And at some point in the middle of the day, you look up and realize 4 hours have passed and you were entirely inside the thing, the way you were inside things when you were 9 years old. In the afternoon, somebody puts a difficult problem in front of you and you feel the shape of it immediately. Not after a night of turning it over, immediately. And you say something in the room that changes the direction of the conversation, and it comes out clean and complete, and you did not construct it. And that evening you sit down with the person who watched you through the underground years, the one who saw you come home depleted for a very long time. And there is nothing you need to say about how the day went, because they can see it in your face before you open your mouth. Chosen one, hold that picture, because it is not a fantasy, and it is not far away. Every element of it is a description of a person operating at their designed capacity in an environment sized correctly for them. That is not an extraordinary life. That is the ordinary life you were built for, and the only reason it feels extraordinary is that you have been living underneath both a ceiling and a fog for so long. Now I want to shift, because there is one more thing I have to say to you tonight. And it is the thing I have been holding back the longest. Everything I have told you in this message has been arranged around a single premise, that a change is coming toward your work, that it is approaching, that your job is about to change suddenly, and we have been preparing you to meet it well. I need to tell you now that the premise is not quite right. It is close, but it is not right, and the correction matters more than anything else I have said. Stay with me for it. Chosen one. The sudden is not a punishment. The sudden is a summons. Chosen one, here is the correction, and I want you to receive it slowly, because it reorganizes everything you have heard tonight. Your job is not about to change. Your job already changed. It changed a long time ago, at the only level where anything ever actually changes, and the sudden you have been waiting for is nothing more than the world catching up to a fact that has already been established. Let me show you exactly when it happened, because you were there. It happened on the day the work stopped fitting you, and you kept going anyway. That day, the specific one you can probably locate if you sit still for a minute. The day something in you registered, with complete clarity, that this was no longer the place, and you got up the next morning and went in, and did excellent work for people who had already lost the right to it. At that moment, the assignment ended. Not the employment, the assignment. Everything after that day has been you completing a handover to a room that does not know yet that it is receiving one. And here is why heaven let it go that way, rather than ending it cleanly. Because a person who is still comfortable never walks through the correct door. Never, not once, in the entire history of human beings. Comfort has never in any life produced the willingness required to step into an unmapped room, and the correct door is always unmapped. So the fit was broken first, deliberately, not to punish you and not to torment you, but because the discomfort you have been begging to be relieved of is the only force strong enough to move a competent person out of a place where they are still succeeding. Chosen one, hear what I am telling you. The exhaustion was not the obstacle to your change. The exhaustion was the change, beginning. It was the first stage of an extraction that has been running for 18 months without your permission and without your understanding. You have been praying for relief from the exact mechanism that is moving you. Now let me go further, because there is a second half to this, and it is the part that will stay with you longest. You have been asking a question for a long time. Should I stay or should I go? You have asked it while driving. You have asked it at 3 in the morning. You have taken it to God and to friends and to a legal pad at a kitchen table. The question has never once been answered, and it has never been answered for a reason that is going to be difficult and then freeing. The question was never yours to answer. You are not the one deciding. You never were. The decision about your position is being made in a room you are not in, on a timeline you were not shown, by an authority that had the file on you updated the week you kept your standard in the dark. Your entire agony has been the agony of a person trying to make a decision that had already been made somewhere else. That is why no amount of thinking has produced clarity. You cannot reason your way to a conclusion about a matter that is not being decided in your jurisdiction. So what is your part? Because I am not going to strip you of agency and leave you with nothing. Your part is not the decision. Your part is the arrival. Your part is to be intact, to be awake, to be clear, to have kept the standard so that the record reads the way it reads, to have cleared enough leakage that you have something in reserve, to have raised the ceiling enough that the option is visible when it appears, to have the instrument working on the ordinary Tuesday. That is your entire assignment between now and the appointed time, not to force a door, not to decide, to arrive at the meeting point in a condition to recognize what is there. And chosen one, if you have been carrying guilt about not having made the decision yet, about being indecisive, about all the months you have spent going back and forth, I want to lift that off you right now. You were not being indecisive. You were being obedient to a delay you did not understand. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole of your character, and it is the reason your name gets said the way it gets said in the room you have never entered. Let me draw all of this together now, because we are moving toward the close, and I want you to leave with the whole structure in your hands and not just the feeling of it. Suddenly does not mean unprepared, and suddenly has never once meant unprepared. It means the invisible has finally reached the surface, and you have been on the incubation floor building a root system nobody photographed. The exhaustion was never a verdict on you. It was the pressure of something too large held in a space too small. And the competence cage is the only trap in existence that catches exclusively capable people. The signals arrive before the change. Displacement, retrieval, examination. 3 lights and 3 lights in 72 hours has never once been nothing. The audition was quiet, it was long, it was made of adversity, and it looked exactly like being forgotten because that is the only way it could measure what it needed to measure. The window will not be scheduled. It will arrive on an ordinary afternoon, and preparation will not be the deciding factor. Readiness will be. The instrument on the day, not the warehouse behind it. 2 doors will open close together, one safe, one correct. Ask which you knew about first. Ask which requires you to become someone. Ask which fear it is, exposure or violation. Ask which one you can explain without the word should. And the ceiling above your income belongs to somebody else and was never meant to be inherited. The floor was the gift. The floor was always the gift. And here is the whole of it in one word. The word that has been sitting in front of you since the first minute of this message. Suddenly is not a threat. Suddenly is the sound a long preparation makes when it finally reaches the surface. Suddenly is what 5 years of root looks like from the outside in week 6. Suddenly is the moment a room that has been discussing you for 11 months finally puts it in writing. Suddenly is 13 years in a cell, and then one morning with clean clothes and a new title before the sun goes down. Suddenly is not the enemy of the patient. Suddenly is the reward of the patient, and it has never once arrived for anyone who did not spend a long, invisible season earning it. Suddenly is only frightening to a person who has not been building. You have been building. So, when it comes suddenly, and it will come suddenly, do not read the speed of it as danger. Read the speed of it as confirmation that the slow part is over. Chosen one. That is everything I know about the season you are standing in. There is nothing else I have to teach you tonight. What remains is something different, and I want you to give me these last minutes fully, because I am going to speak something over your work, over your name, and over the room you have not walked into yet. Chosen one, before we go into the closing, I want to do one thing with you, and I want you to actually participate rather than listening to me describe it. This will take a few minutes, and it is the most important few minutes of our entire time together. If you are able, put down whatever is in your hands. If you are driving, keep your eyes where they belong and simply listen. Everyone else, let your eyes close. Let your shoulders come down. Let your jaw come loose. Let the breath go all the way to the bottom once, and then let it go out slowly, without controlling the pace of it. Now I want you to picture a room. It is a room you have never been in. It is not grand and it is not intimidating. It is an ordinary room, with ordinary light coming in from one side, and there are a few people in it. You do not know their faces. You have never met them. They are talking about you, not critically. They are discussing something they need done, something that matters to them, something they have been trying to solve for a while. And one of them says your name. Watch what happens in the room when your name is said. Notice that nobody objects. Notice that nobody asks who that is. Notice the small nod from the person by the window, the one who has been quiet the whole time, who now looks up because the name means something to them. Stay in that room for a moment longer. Notice that you are not in it. You are somewhere else entirely right now, doing something ordinary, completely unaware, and it is happening anyway. Now let the room go and come back to where you are sitting. I want you to feel the difference between two sentences. For years you have been living inside the first one. Nobody sees what I am carrying. Here is the second one. I am being discussed in rooms I have not entered, by people who do not need my permission to notice me. Both of those cannot be true, and only one of them has any evidence behind it, and it is not the one you have been living inside. Now place your hand on your heart. Actually do it. Feel the rhythm underneath your palm, the steady, insistent thing that has not once stopped through every year you thought you were being overlooked. That rhythm kept going through the season nobody promoted you. It kept going through the meeting where they gave your work to someone else. It kept going at 3 in the morning when you were doing the math. It has never once required your permission or your attention, and it has never once considered stopping. Something in you has been sustained by a source that does not depend on recognition, and whatever has been sustaining it has not been waiting for your circumstances to improve before it decided you were worth sustaining. Keep your hand where it is. Now declare this with me, out loud if you can, and if you cannot speak, then say it inside yourself with everything you have. I am not behind, I am underground. I am not forgotten, I am being read. I am not too late, I am on an appointed schedule that was set before I was born. My name is being spoken in rooms I have never entered. And when the door opens, I will be awake. Let your hand rest there a moment longer. Feel the weight of what you just said, because those were not affirmations and they were not wishful thinking. Every one of those sentences is a statement about a structure that exists whether or not you declare it. Declaring it does not create it. Declaring it aligns you with something already true, and alignment is the difference between walking through your life braced against it and walking through it in agreement with what is actually happening. That is why the declaration matters, not because words are magic, because a person who has said a true thing out loud stops arguing with it internally, and the energy that was going into the argument becomes available for something else. Now let your hand come down. Chosen one, I want to tell you about one more person before we close, and then I will not tell you any more stories tonight. There was a woman I knew who spent 9 years in a role that everyone around her considered beneath her, including her. She had a specific and unusual combination of skills that her position used almost none of. She stayed because of a family situation that made moving impossible for those years, and she made peace with it in the way people do, which is to say, incompletely. She told me the thing that nearly broke her was not the work. It was a specific recurring moment. Every year, at the annual review, her manager would say some version of, "We do not know what we would do without you." And every year she would go home and sit in the car in the driveway and feel something she could not name. She finally named it in her 7th year. She said, "They meant it as the highest compliment they had, and what I heard was that my ceiling is their convenience." In the 9th year, a woman she had helped years earlier, someone she had barely thought about since, was appointed to lead a division at a much larger organization. And within her first month in that role, she made a list of everyone she wanted to bring with her. There was one name at the top of that list, and it had been at the top of a mental version of that list for 6 years. She told me afterward that the call took 11 minutes. 9 years of waiting, and the sudden that ended it took 11 minutes. And she said something to me about those 9 years that I have never forgotten, and it is the reason I have told you this. She said, "I used to think I was serving out a sentence. I was building a reputation in a room I could not see." Chosen one, that is where you are. I am going to close this now, and I want you to stay for the last part, because everything I have taught you tonight has been the structure, and what comes now is the thing the structure was built to hold. Let the analysis rest. Let the tools sit where they are. You will remember what you need to remember when you need it. For these last minutes, I do not want you thinking, I want you receiving. Let your breathing slow, one more time. Chosen one, before the closing, let me put the whole of tonight into your hands as something you can carry rather than something you merely felt. Tomorrow morning you will wake up and the room will look the same. The commute will be the same. The building will be the same. And there is a real danger that by 10 in the morning, everything that has moved in you tonight will have been quietly filed away as a good message you listened to once. So, here is what tomorrow looks like. 7 things. None of them require permission from anyone. None of them cost money. And every one of them is available to you before this week ends. Watch the board. Displacement, retrieval, examination. Keep a note on your phone with 3 words at the top and a date column underneath. When something moves without explanation, write it down. When someone from your past surfaces, write it down. When you are asked a question that is larger than your role, write it down with the exact wording. Do not interpret. Record. In 8 weeks, you will have something no amount of intuition could have given you, which is a pattern in your own handwriting. Hold the standard. Wherever you currently are, and however little it deserves you, do not lower the quality of your work in the final stretch. The final stretch is the part of the audition that decides everything, and it is also the part where every capable person is most tempted to stop caring. Finish the way you would want the record to read. Close one leak, just one, this week. The unresolved conflict you are managing, the commitment that no longer makes sense, the financial disorder that costs you a small hit of anxiety every time you think about it. Pick the one you are most avoiding and close it, and notice how much energy it gives back. Build the space, 30 protected minutes, once a week, to begin with, where nothing is consumed and nothing is produced. No headphones, no screen. The first 3 times will feel useless. On the 4th or 5th, something will surface that you did not go looking for. That is not mysticism. That is what a mind does when it is finally given room to do it. Say the number out loud. to one person you trust, the figure your income has hovered around, and the sentence that goes with it, which is, "I do not think this ceiling has anything to do with my ability." A ceiling that has been spoken about is a different object from one that has not. Guard your speech about the people who overlooked you. Say less than you want to. It will be repeated, and it will be attached to your name in rooms you will never see. And keep the instrument in working order. Sleep like it matters, because it does. Protect the first hour of your day from other people. Give yourself the conditions your mind was actually designed to operate under, as much as your life will allow. Because the day is coming that you cannot schedule, and the version of you that is available on that day is the version that meets it. 7 things. Write them down before you sleep tonight, because you will not remember all 7 tomorrow, and the value of a thing you can no longer recall is 0. And let me add one more thing, because it is the instruction that people report back to me about most often. When the call comes, and it will come in some form, do not answer it immediately. I do not mean delay for strategy. I mean this. When something significant is put in front of you, say a version of this sentence: "Thank you. This matters enough that I want to give it a proper answer rather than a fast one. Can I come back to you tomorrow?" Almost nobody will refuse that. And what it buys you is the single most valuable thing in the entire transaction, which is one night with the information. Because here is what happens overnight. The part of you that processes things below the surface goes to work on it, and by morning you will know something you could not possibly have known in the room. Not more facts. A clearer read. The detail that seemed insignificant will have moved to the front. The enthusiasm will have either deepened or quietly drained. And either of those is enormously useful information. The people who make the worst decisions of their lives make them in the room, in the moment, while flattered. The people who make the best ones almost always slept once first. One night, ask for it every time. Now, chosen one, let me speak to the part of you that has been listening underneath all of this. There is a specific grief that belongs to people like you, and almost nobody names it. So I am going to name it now. It is the grief of the unwitnessed years. Not the hard years. You can survive hard. It is the years where you were excellent and nobody was looking, where you held something together and no record exists of it, where you made a decision in private that cost you something real, and there was no one there, and afterward you could not even tell the story properly because telling it would have sounded like asking for credit. Those years accumulate in a person. They accumulate as a quiet, patient doubt that sits underneath everything, and the doubt says one sentence over and over. If it did not count for anyone, did it count at all? I want to answer that directly, and I want it to be the last thing I teach you tonight. Nothing you did in the dark is missing, not 1 hour of it. The system that kept the record is not the system that runs your building. It does not require a witness in the room, because it was already in the room. Every unwitnessed year is witnessed. Every private decision was public somewhere. Every standard you held with no audience was the audition, and the audition was the whole point, and you passed it in the only place where passing matters. Think of Joseph one more time. 13 years between the dream and the palace. 13 in a foreign country, in a house that was not his, and then in a prison for something he did not do. And in all that time there is not one recorded moment of him being told that any of it was working. Not one confirmation, not one sign. Just years of being excellent in rooms where excellence bought him nothing. And then a morning came, and a servant remembered something, and a king needed a dream interpreted, and a man was pulled out of a cell, shaved, given clean clothes, and installed as the second most powerful person in the world before the day ended. 13 years of nothing, and then a single morning. The morning was sudden. Suddenly is always how these mornings arrive. The 13 years were not wasted, and every one of those years was the reason he could hold what the morning gave him. Chosen one, that is you. That is the exact shape of what you are living in. You are not late. You are not overlooked. You are not finished. You are 13 years into something, and you cannot see the morning yet, and the morning does not require you to see it in order to arrive. The sudden is not a punishment. The sudden is a summons. And I believe, with everything in me, that your sudden is close. Chosen one, let it get quiet now. Wherever you are, whatever is around you, let the room get smaller for a few minutes. This is the part that is not for your understanding. This is for something further in. I want to begin with gratitude, and not the performed kind. I am not going to ask you to be grateful for the hard years. Some things do not need to be called good in order to be carried well, but I want you to look at something with me. You are still here, after everything. After the season that took more than you had. After the year you were sure you would not recover from. After the disappointment you never fully told anyone about. After the version of your life that did not happen, and the grief of it that nobody held with you. You are still here, still working, still holding a standard, still capable of being moved by a message about your own future, which is not a small thing, because the first thing that dies in a person who has given up is the capacity to be moved. You have not given up. Whatever else is true tonight, that is true, and it is not a small thing, and I do not want it to pass unnoticed one more time. Something has been carrying you. You did not do all of this on your own strength, and you know it, because there were specific weeks that you should not have gotten through, and you got through them, and you have never been able to fully explain how. Let that be acknowledged, not analyzed, acknowledged. Now I want you to put something down. You have been carrying weight that was never assigned to you, and you have carried it so long that you have stopped experiencing it as weight. It has become posture. So let us take some of it off, deliberately, right now, one piece at a time. Release the belief that the years were wasted. They were not. They were root. Release the verdict you passed on yourself when you were passed over. That verdict was written by an exhausted person at the worst possible moment, and it was never valid. Release the guilt about not having decided yet. The decision was not in your jurisdiction, and your patience was obedience, not weakness. Release the shame about the fog. It was not a character flaw, it was a condition, and conditions are not confessions. Release the loyalty that keeps you underneath a ceiling built by people who loved you. They gave you a floor, they never asked for a ceiling. Release the need to be understood by the people who overlooked you. They are not your audience. They never were. The room that matters has already heard about you. Release the fear of being found out. You are not a fraud. You are a person who has been operating above their circumstances for so long that the mismatch feels like deception. Release the hurry. The appointed time is not moved by your anxiety, and it has never once been late. And release the belief that you must arrive at your next season already perfect. You will arrive tired. Most people do. Tired and awake is enough. Tired and awake has always been enough. Breathe out. Notice that something has actually moved. Not everything, something. That is how this works. It comes off in layers, and the first layer coming off is what makes the next one possible. Chosen one, I want to tell you what I see when I look at the season you are standing in. I see a person who has been faithful in a place that stopped deserving faithfulness a long time ago, and who kept going anyway, not because they were naive, but because the standard belonged to them and not to the building. I see somebody who has been quietly excellent in front of people who were not equipped to recognize it, and who never once used that as a reason to become less. I see someone who has been tired in a way that most of the people in their life have never fully understood, and who kept getting up and kept showing up and kept doing the work at the same level on days when nobody would have blamed them for doing less. That is not a small life. That is not a stalled life. That is the least visible and most demanding form of faithfulness there is, and it is exactly the form that gets a name said in a room. You have been waiting a long time to hear something specific, and I want to say it plainly. It was not for nothing. Every hour of it is accounted for. Every year is on the record. Every private decision is documented in a place that does not lose files and does not need you to remind it. And the season that is coming is not a reward for something you are about to do. It is the release of something that has already been earned, held in trust, waiting for the correct hour to be delivered. Now let me speak about the room one more time, and then we will finish. There is a door that has your name attached to it, not a metaphorical door. A specific position, a specific opening, a specific place where the work you were built for is currently being done badly by someone else, or not being done at all because the person who is supposed to do it has not arrived yet. That door does not know your timeline and does not care about your anxiety. It has one property. It opens suddenly on a day that has already been set. And on that day, the entire question of your next 20 years reduces to something almost embarrassingly simple. Will you be awake when it happens suddenly? Not qualified. You are qualified. Not prepared. You are prepared. Not deserving. That was settled a long time ago in a conversation you were not part of. Awake, clear, present, able to hear the thing that is being offered while it is still being offered, and able to answer before the window closes. That is the whole of it. That is everything I have brought you here to say. Chosen one, stay awake. Chosen one, place your hand on your heart and declare this with me. Say it with whatever voice you have tonight. If it is a whisper, let it be a whisper. Heaven has never once required volume. I am not behind. I am underground, and underground is where roots are made. I am not forgotten. I have been read in rooms I have never entered by people who did not need my permission to notice me. I am not too late. I am on an appointed schedule that was set before my name existed. I am not a fraud. I am a person who has been operating above my circumstances for so long that the mismatch feels like deception. I am not stuck. I am being extracted, and the discomfort I have been begging to be relieved of is the mechanism that is moving me. My years were not wasted. My years were root. My work will change suddenly, and I will be awake when it does. I am carried. I have always been carried, and I will be carried through the door as surely as I was carried through the wilderness that qualified me for it. If that declaration is yours tonight, comment "awake" below. Now, feel the weight of what you just said, because that was not a set of affirmations and it was not an exercise in positive thinking. A declaration works for a reason that has nothing to do with magic. When a person says a true thing out loud, they stop arguing with it internally. And the argument was expensive. The argument has been running in the background of your mind for years, consuming the exact resource you need for everything else. What you just did was not create a new reality, it was stop fighting one that already exists. And the energy that has been going into that fight, quietly every day for a very long time, is now available for something else. That is why it matters. That is the whole mechanism. You were made in the image of something whose speech creates, and the smallest version of that inheritance is that what you say out loud stops being something you have to keep defending against yourself. Chosen one, let me speak over you now. I bless your discernment, that you will know the difference between the fear of exposure and the fear of violation on the day it matters most. I bless your patience, the kind that has already cost you more than anyone around you understands. I bless your standard, and the strange stubborn integrity that made you hold it in rooms where holding it bought you nothing. I bless your clarity, that the fog would lift and that your own mind would be returned to you in the fullness it was designed to operate in. I bless your capacity to recognize the moment while it is still open and to answer it before it closes. And I bless the ordinary Tuesday that is coming, that you would be awake in it and steady in it and entirely yourself when your name is finally spoken toward the door. May the favor that has been arranged for you find you in good condition. May the room that has been discussing you receive you well. And may the years that nobody witnessed be repaid to you in a currency you can actually spend. Go steady, go awake, go without hurry. Chosen one, wherever you are right now, whether you are sitting in a car in a parking lot before going in, or lying awake at an hour when you should be asleep, or standing in a kitchen at the end of a day that took more from you than it gave, I want you to take one thing with you. You have not been overlooked. You have been in the part of the story that has no witnesses, and that part always ends. The sudden is not a punishment, the sudden is a summons. And when the sudden comes, you will not be caught off guard. You have been getting ready for it since long before tonight, and you did not even know that was what you were doing.